Well, afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be back with you. Today, we're obviously talking about how AI is reshaping finance. So this is going to be the finance industry, fintech, banking, pretty much the whole gamut. So first of all, I'd like to just ask a couple of questions about the changes that's going on in finance and banking at the moment. We've just gone through a wave of digital hitting everything under the sun. People have been upgrading systems, changing processes, bringing in third parties to help and change. Now we've got AI. Is this hitting at a bad time because we're in the middle of a transition already? Or is this something that's looked forward to and celebrated? Whoever wants to pick it up.
I can start.
Thanks, Murari.
Yeah, hi. So basically, AI is not new. So whoever is thinking AI is new is wrong. AI is quite old. And I go with this. We want AI to do laundry and dishes, not the writing or innovation. What does that mean? So we have a legacy system in the financial industry, and we have a lot of processes. AI is just going to help you to do the dishes and laundry. All the innovation work, human has to be in the loop. AI is just going to help you to augment, to do the innovation, and all those things. So LLM is quite new. That's a new tool of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Anybody?
I agree with part of what Murari said. AI is not new. Predictive AI is decades old. At Visa, we've been using it for the last 30 or 40 years to prevent fraud and to protect consumer behavior. What is happening with generative AI is that the efficacy of the models and the prediction is improving a lot, and it's actually creating a lot of value and new use cases. So as an example, we see 200 billion transactions in a year. Each transaction has 500 different data elements.
Okay.
We used to analyze this using predictive AI and try to prevent fraud, for us and for our partners. We've seen the efficacy of the models go significantly up since we started to use Gen AI for those, and you're going along the value chain of using better and better models as you have in the past, and then adding on the Gen AI layer to it. It also makes transporting them a lot easier. So we're now using the same model that is trained on our data to help other newer networks put it on their infrastructure and actually help them leverage what has been built to increase the resilience of their network. So it's going to see all of these interesting use cases come through, and it's going to be more of an evolution rather than a stop.
Does this mean huge amounts of upgrades on infrastructure, Thorsten, or is this something that we're ready for?
I would share from the kind of corporate venture building side of the kind of innovation agenda, where we augment the financial service sector, spin out fintechs and similar startups. And where we're seeing that real impact is how you can leverage that in new business models, right? So specifically, if we look at capabilities around trade finance, can we leverage LLMs to improve the accuracy of the information we're extracting from invoices or bill of ladings? In supply chain finance, it might be, for instance, taking news events and external data sources and breaking that down into perhaps risk categories across supply chain, credit, and ESG. But there is absolutely, to your question, a need for that infrastructure, be it within a smaller type firm, a startup, or the financial institutions overall, to think about how do you centralize a capability that can service the institution or the business as a whole with the underlying technical components, such as your large language models, your internal hosted models, your vector stores, your guardrails. And that needs to be put in place first, not down to the foundation model level, those you can get, but really there's that infrastructure on which you can then build applications or no-code, low-code solutions, which we can talk to in a moment.
So there's huge insatiable demand for data storage, compute. I know that the regulators get involved here when banks and financial institutions can use the cloud, they can't use the cloud. Where does all this data reside in this next 12, 18 months? Is this on-prem, hybrid? Where does this fit?
Bill, if I can
please
comment on your earlier question and also then help to address what you just said. I think if you look at the bigger picture, like what you started about digital transformation, this has happened in banks since years ago. If you don't have a digital solution, digital bank, you are not in business. To me, that is table stake. That's no longer differentiating. What AI and Gen AI especially can provide to banks and financial services is that differentiations. I just want to quickly quote research by Accenture, where we look at thousands of companies globally. And banks come out on top in terms of the opportunity to leverage tools like language model, Gen AI, to completely reinvent how banking is done.
Right.
And 54% of all banking processes can be automated by Gen AI. I'm not even talking about classical AI. Another 12% can be augmented. And for banks that see this in a different light, not as just another model or infrastructure I need to put in place, as an opportunity to reinvent banking, we'll be able to leapfrog the rest. That is the big picture. Now, coming back to your question now, is that how do I then set up what we call the digital core to enable what, these differentiating capabilities? And one of the major considerations is obviously the whole data foundation and the AI foundation. When it comes to data foundation, one of the biggest concerns, then coming back to your question now, is that how do I safeguard my data privacy? How do I make sure that my IPs continue to retain in my organization? Therefore, there's this notion about maybe it's not everything should be in the cloud. Maybe there should be my data, my model, on-prem, air-gap on-prem, and so that it is not exposed.
Yeah. Because we've heard over the last few 24 hours, 48 hours, this argument about decentralization, centralization, trying to understand how that balances in the traditional world of banking versus the quote-unquote new world of fintech and the rest of it. Is that a battle that's going to be ongoing, or is it a foregone conclusion that it's going to remain centralized?
So what we can see, especially with examples, for instance, of Trust Bank, being a neobank, being in Singapore, and I'd say hugely successful, is that you can have a cloud-native approach and thereby gain a lot of business agility. But of course, in this case, we can also say it is within one geography, within a very mature kind of environment, and leveraging the best of the cloud services around data storage, the technical controls around data protection. Once we get to a certain level of complexity, and this is, if it is regional banks or larger international banks, is that challenge or that confluence of data sovereignty, privacy and personal information, data classification, and having the right kind of governance around that. And it is really about adopting AI at scale, but in a scalable but secure manner. Really core to how we approach that.
Just building on what Thorsten is saying, right? There's the models and where they sit and what compute power they need, and there is data. And then maybe there'll be a differentiation between the two in one future scenario where the models can sit anywhere. It's probably better if they sit on the cloud and they're using all the computing power, which is more centralized and that allows for better energy usage, so on and so forth. But data is super important. That's what will differentiate people. So it's corporates and companies might decide that, and banks might decide that they want to keep the data with themselves, not just from a regulation or a risk or a PII perspective, but just because that's where the value is. So it'll be interesting to see how that
So that leads very nicely to the conversation around competitive advantage. I've been in the IT industry for around 100 years, and I've seen a lot of first leader advantage for competitors. And nowadays, the speed at which you have to execute is probably faster than it's ever been, and it's only going to get faster. So is this, in the context of things like mass customization and various other terms that I keep hearing, is this going to enable financial institutions to customize offers to people faster and bring things to market for a huge competitive advantage?
I think hyper-personalization will definitely get more frequent and more hyper, and it will you will see a lot of unique offers, targeting, marketing messages, so on and so forth, go out to those consumers. It'll again be dependent on how much of that is leveraging data and how you protect that data and how much of it is yours versus today the LLMs have been trained on publicly available data. So if the right model is there, you're ultimately reading free stuff off the internet, and that's what your intelligence is based on. If you start then looking at the walled gardens of data with those corporates, it'll be interesting to see how that gets used and how people are able to use it to their advantage. And that is not going to necessarily be shareable across to others. So I think that's where more of the differentiation will come. The value proposition from a technical standpoint might be the same, but how efficient it is will be defined by what data you have.
And just to add, I think if we look back, and perhaps to Murari's point too, is AI is not new to banks and financial institutions, right? You've had models, you've had predictive analytics, and those are still continuing to be built out, right? They add a lot of value to the business. What we have to be cognizant of is that was all unstructured data. You had tick data, you had transaction records, in Visa's case, payment records. And so you could create those models. Where the opportunity lies, and we believe very much that there's opportunities also to create new business models on these, is really just to capitalize on the fact that there's the ability to process unstructured data to create that hyper-personalization. So previously you might have had a chart or a certain dashboard. Now it might go into the narrative, maybe your portfolio summary. Maybe that won't be limited to text, but potentially even read to you while you're having your morning coffee.
So do we see this as another tool in the toolbox, or is generative AI, for example, a real transformation for finance and banking?
Let me take that. So LLM is very black box to me. It's like, who knows on what data the model has been built? Until and unless you have a use case for your industry, you know your knowledge base on what kind of policy you want to make for your people. Like, for example, you are a global bank and you have something in US or UK and you are hiring someone in Singapore. Let's say something in the data part. So how do you make your JD? It has to be standardized globally. If anybody can apply in US or UK, so to standardize this, you can use LLM, but having said that, it is all on your value. So you cannot use LLM just like that. It is just an API call and you can use it. But you have to do fine-tuning to make it more relevant for you, for your organization. So LLM, yes, it's a tool to your box, but it's unknown to you. And people are actually stuck with their legacy system. And you are telling people to drive Ferrari, but they are not actually driving the basic car. So there has to be a proper education to your skill talent. Like there's a good example. Like we want people to have a purple hat. Purple is a combination of red and blue. Red means you are very advanced technically, and blue means you are very advanced in the data science. But we don't need a specialized skill. LLM is like that. So you need to know the mixture, the combination, the purple hat, how to use technology, how to use data science to solve a business problem. Right. And that is where we don't have control on the data on which LLM model has been developed, but what you have control on the output it gives. You should have a proper guardrail. It should not hallucination. LLM comes with a new kind of risk. Predictive model, we know we have a lot of framework. MAS has FEET, UK has GDPR and all, but on LLM, what kind of risk it is going to generate, how to mitigate them, what are the framework and policy, that is not so clear.
Right.
So I think we are learning that.
Yeah. And Bill, for sure this is transformative. And I explain why. 80% of the world's data is unstructured in nature. You're talking about text, videos, images. And for the longest time, the world didn't have an easy way to access this data and insights. Before the large language model era, it was difficult. For any banks especially, that's very much language-driven, right? Talk about advisory, you talk about a lot of the work like KYC in banks, for example, or even in insurance advisory, is language-related. And all of a sudden, there's an opportunity to harness this technology to transform how you conduct business. You look at, for example, JP Morgan has got Index GPT You can Google them. They launched this index GPT to help you decide on thematic investing. That is unthinkable in the past.
Yeah.
One example, right? And another example is that if you look at the task of a lawyer, I don't know whether there's lawyers here. If you Google and look for do not pay, this is the world's first Gen AI robot lawyer. This is transformative. And which is why I think I have the good fortune of interacting with many of the CEOs and the C-suites here. And obviously, there is different attitude towards adoption of technologies like Gen AI. Some is a bit more like a wait and see. We spoke briefly about that. And experimenting massively. And everybody is experimenting. But there are companies or banks or financial services institutions that look at this as a brilliant opportunity to completely change the way banks operate, and therefore leapfrog competitions. This is it, right? And when you look at what they do differently, they invest differently, they create the environment for experimentation, for scaling, and therefore they have appreciation for the infrastructure that's required, and so on and so forth. So it all starts from there.
So who has the natural advantage here? Is it the early stage fintechs, or is this the traditional banking systems? Because those that were born in the cloud, this is normal for them? Traditional banks have got to learn a lot of new things, no?
No, I just want to pick up on John's point and to that direction of the conversation is that a lot of the problem statements themselves exist in the large established financial institutions. And we're not talking here about headcount reductions or wanting to reduce the workforce. It is really at this early stage the opportunity to automate laborious, repetitive tasks and leverage these models for process automation. That in itself, and to the conversation we had with John backstage, is thinking about how the organization operates and how to bring AI into those processes. Some of those opportunities might be in, for instance, automating the review of supply chain contracts or looking at legal documents in terms of just automating the day-to-day work of definitions, clauses, the robustness of the words in the contracts. In our case, from SE Ventures, some experiments in RegTech and looking at how do, for instance, regulations translate into obligations, into risk management frameworks, and then into the business, and the many thousands of hours that could be saved. To your question, though, is this from within or external? And partially where we sit as SC Ventures is to navigate that, pick up on these problem statements, and effectively build a expertise around that can be commercialized. That is deep domain knowledge. Sometimes it's even within a licensed space outside of a bank, but still with some sort of regulatory oversight or some sort of license. But what we think we can do there is solve very specific problems.
Right.
Of course, at the same time, the learning should go back to the organization because they themselves have many other pain points and problem statements to tackle. And that learning in itself, I think, leads to better outcomes.
How do you keep up with the talent requirements? There's obviously questions about attracting in the talent. It's a competitive environment. Those that get the top talent often have a competitive advantage. How do you retain the talent you've got? How do you have an environment inside of your organization to develop that talent? And what happens to those people that don't get it? Is this a big churn that's coming, or is this one that's always been there and we're just seeing it amplified?
I can start. I think it's super important that there's a culture of experimenting with AI in the organization. It cannot be a silo that the innovation team or 5 people that have AI in their job title look at a particular in a particular company. That's a recipe for disaster, because to really get new use cases going, people understanding how to use this for business problems, have good appreciation for risk, you need everyone in the organization to understand how the tool works, how these technologies will evolve, what could be the pros, what could be the cons, and how to manage that risk-reward equation for your company or your bank or your financial institution. So what we are doing, for example, is we're one of the early adopters of installing a secure GPT instance within our organization at Visa, We made the Copilot tools available to every single employee, running a few hackathons that had thousands of ideas kind of come through, and all of that was with the intent of telling people that it's good to experiment, you must experiment. Every product, every feature, every kind of task that you do, whether it's internal or external in nature, you should be thinking about how to use this technology so that that muscle is being built in the organization, that you have to think about this aspect as you go along. We don't know how much of it will change in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, but that broad foundation is necessity.
And Bill, I want to connect the question you asked earlier with this, if I may, right? Because it's all related. Your questions was earlier about startups versus the more traditional.
Yeah.
The startups has agility. They can move quickly. But the traditional institutions, financial institutions, have scale.
And the computing power, right?
the trick is about introducing agility into the traditional organizations, if I may, right? If you represent the big corporations. And that's the trick. That's how this relates to the second point about the talent is that how do you create the agility and create a way of working that enable innovations, speed to market, and this constant energy to create new product services that differentiates. I mean, that's really the trick now. Now, if I can extend that further, that if I can oversimplify this in the world of AI, because I get asked questions about, so should everybody learn Python now, right? Should the lawyer learn Python? Should insurance agent learn Python?
I don't think so.
So the question is, of course, not. There's this world of a group of people who are the developers of AI. These are the data scientists and all that. But there is a group of people who should be smart users of AI. And these are the people who understand the technology in terms of how to use it, apply it in real-life business problems. And therefore, this ability to interlock or have that intersection between the data scientists and the AI artists. And that's how this thing will connect. And therefore, if you look at the workforce, there must be the baseline understanding of what AI is about. But there must be clarity in terms of if you are a data scientist or AI engineer, this is your path. And that's what makes you, and I create an environment for you to experiment, innovate, and give you the incentive and investment for you to do that. At the same time, for the rest of the organization, let me prepare you to embrace this technology by giving you enough understanding, but your role is not the data scientist role. You are the AI artist. Yeah. You think about creatively how to develop product services, how do you differentiate and win in the market. I think that's how we tackle the topic of talent.
Very good.
And thinking where we start the conversation, right? Because there's a certain prudence to running into the next shiny new technology. There's a lot of unknowns about some of the, as I said, we talked about the training of the large language models and the potential outputs they produce. And so there's certain ground rules around human in the loop, the opportunities in the first instance to focus on internal automations, but further so educating the workforce is part of that journey. You really have a pool of very smart, capable individuals who are now looking to help themselves in how they can bring this capability into their everyday job. Part of the challenge, perhaps touching a bit on the infrastructure part, is that a lot of the work is performed in desktop applications, right? Your typical Excel, Microsoft Word, which itself is not fully connected into the AI infrastructure or the capabilities on the back end. But the starting point, as we've seen, has been just the use of ChatGPT and through a chat box. Important is to really educate that workforce, and we do this more from the bank side and through training programs around the responsible and ethical use of AI. So let it augment you in your work, but be mindful of the information that you're putting into the system, have the controls to filter and validate the data being submitted to the models, even if they're not learning, but nonetheless purely from a data protection perspective, and then more so also to validate the outputs. So I think there's that real obligation on every firm, be it fintech, gung-ho on using latest AI, right through to the large finance institutions.
What about the world of the regulators? Does the regulators keep up with this? Do they have a major say? I've worked with banks in the past, and I've seen them going through extensive audits from regulators, having to change things very, very quickly. Can the auditor actually keep up with this? What do we need to do to change anything to do with regulatory, from a government point of view? Or?
Regulation will always stay behind technology, right? That's the nature of things. I think what some governments, like what's happening in Singapore, is they've laid out a clear framework, what they expect companies, financial institutions, other users of data to follow. But they're not restricting experimentation and creativity by ham-handed kind of regulation. So that's a good model. I think ultimately, technology and trends will evolve so fast, and financial services industry is based on trust. So every single organization will have to be super mindful of what their definition of trust is, what their customers expect or want, and then have to stay abreast of what's happening in the industry and almost regulate themselves to maintain that trust rather than fall to the lowest common denominator of what the law says at any point in time.
Got it.
Let me add, so let me be more realistic. So we would like to live in the world where organizations promote to do experimentation on AI and train you well and all those things. But at the same time, organization is also worry on the cost. So how much cost? So with the use of AI, you really need to prove that it is beneficial for the organization. So there is a left to right and right to left approach. So what does that mean? That means that you use AI to improve, to gain the operational efficiency and show the benefit to the organization. Then more fund will come, and then you use AI for the strategic goal, for standardization of the policy and all those things, conversational AI agents and all. At the same time, the trust, as Pratik was saying, the regulators and all, it is not so easy. So Google, Sundar Pichai was saying, right, technology is moving so fast that universities are lagging behind. So we cannot take any grads because technology has moved so fast and the course is so old. And one famous, how the ethical and responsible AI has come into the picture with the Google card. So Google has introduced a credit card, and the spouse or husband got 10x credit limit as compared to wife. Both have same background, education background and professional and everything, which is a clearly biased, right? So you don't know what kind of risk you would be getting if you use AI. Yeah. You need to be aware of it. So even if you do the experimentation, train people, you need to know for the adoption of AI, what kind of challenges, what kind of tests you need to do because it is going to impact the society. We all apply credit card, right? And if like my credit card application got rejected and someone else got accepted with the same background, it is not good for the society. Nobody is going to believe you. So there has to be transparency and all. So yes, technology is moving super fast, and regulators has to lag behind, but ultimately they have to make a mandate. Then only organization is going to adopt AI in the real way so that it can benefit to the society.
Okay.
So Accenture is fortunate enough to work with MAS, the regulator here in Singapore, and over the years, and the whole idea is around promoting the responsible use of AI. Now, instead of imposing on you with regulations, I provide you with framework and considerations and tools so that you volunteer to impose that on yourself before we regulate, right? So I think that's the idea. So if you look at, for example, there's this program called Veritas. You can Google them. MAS Veritas introduces the FIT principle, and which is a guideline for the banks and financial institutions, and no matter which part of the world you are, can make a reference. And we work with them to develop a tool called Veritas Toolkit. It's available to download, and this is the toolkit that actually you can put in your whole model development lifecycle to actually detect biases and so on and so forth. And in fact, just most recently, we launched what we call the Project MyForge paper on Gen AI risk and opportunities framework. So to answer your question, I think the whole idea is that yes, I think the regulators are really trying to also keep up, right? And regulation may not be the bad thing because it actually allows responsible innovations and use of technology. So actually, it can work to actually as a catalyst and not to stifle innovations.
Right. Can I shift gears now to payments and even cross-border payments? Does Gen AI or anything in the current toolbox of AI transform payments now and accelerate the transformation of payments?
In our case, more speaking to trade finance and financing, be it shipments of goods and so on. Absolutely. What we see in one of our ventures, Olia, is that not only have we leveraged AI in the form of OCR, being able to automate processes, in this case, leverage the cloud AI capabilities, pre-trained models, less onerous on us and less demand on us to label these invoices. But putting that in combination with, for instance, a GPT-4 gives you an incredible accuracy because you're effectively validating that payment, that financing transaction through the lens of an OCR, extracting information, and a GPT that's reasoning on the document. And putting these two together and reconciling that allows us to achieve a much higher level of straight-through processing.
Okay.
What you're realizing as a business, suddenly be it a fintech or be it a bank in this business, is that every single human operator can simply process a higher volume of transactions. And that means faster turnaround, quicker financing, and a lot less error, as an example.
Very good.
Yep.
I think short answer is yes.
Done.
It will make payments a lot more secure. Obviously, there'll always be this tension between democratization of technology means bad actors also have access to that technology, so you need to invest in your infrastructure and keeping pace. But overall, if you do it right, it'll make payments a lot more secure, including cross-border payments. I think the speed of payments from a consumer or retail standpoint is already pretty fast at the moment, given all the innovations that have happened in the past few years and decades. What we'll see, though, is a lot more contextual nature of shopping and buying behavior, particularly online, that will evolve. So your buying journey might be a lot shorter. Your decision to buy might be much more faster because you'll get recommendations that are targeted at you based on your past behavior, and it's stuff that you like versus having to troll through thousands of things. So the transaction itself probably is already pretty fast. I don't think that will make a meaningful difference, but all the steps before that will become a lot more streamlined and more robust.
Okay. Very good.
I think I'll just add a related point because Pratik is a payment expert, so I won't claim to be one. But I think we spoke about briefly about from the dimension of security, right? If you have not heard of fraud GPT, you may want to Google that, and the dark LLM, because now the bad actors can abuse large language model to attack any of the payment networks. So I think that came out as one of those hot topics from many of the CISOs, many of the payment clients that we have. Is really about tackling that dimension of security, cybersecurity, as one of the hot topics here.
There's another area I'm interested in, which is the world of HFT, or high-frequency trading. Lots of books been written about the impact of high-frequency trading and how the big guys screw the little guys, and whichever side of the story you want to be on. Does AI now accelerate the ability to do high-frequency trading, getting those super-fast trading companies now to outbid and outwin everybody in the cycle of running markets, futures markets, equity markets? Or is the hope still for the little guy?
I'm nowhere close to this high-frequency trading area, but it looks like it is less AI, more on the computing power. So it is more on the hardware side, less on the AI side, because you just get microseconds. So it is more on the compute power. Basic AI will do the work, but all depends what kind of hardware and compute power.
Still comes down to horsepower, right?
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Okay. On the just sort of continuing that theme of the big guy, the little guy, if you wish, the infrastructure in a number of emerging markets around the world, not that good. As we layer in more and more requirements of technology, we move to AI, Gen AI, whatever it may be as the next generation, that puts in more pressure on the requirements for robust infrastructure to handle all this. Does this mean now that those developed markets run ahead of those less developed markets, or is this something where the less developed markets can leapfrog the technology and actually gain an upper hand?
Okay.
Do we see this as a bad thing or a good thing?
Give you a view, and mostly from the vantage point of SC Ventures having spun out 30 businesses across a lot of the emerging markets in Africa and Middle East, a number of Southeast Asian countries, where we find the benefit being this access to this ubiquitous cloud. Even, I think, if we take it one step further and we look at even the sponsors, IO.net, who provide an incredible platform, you're suddenly getting access to resources and compute that previously you couldn't. The connectivity itself has already come a long way, and so that's no longer the blocker, and I think we briefly touched on that discussion around data versus the model serving and the actual model kind of processing. And there's ways to navigate that. And I absolutely think that that's a huge opportunity for the developed markets, developing markets, to really catch up and look at the data sets that they might have locally. These could be unstructured data, these could be alternate data, these could be telco data records, and use those for businesses that are perhaps doing credit scoring or other type of AI use cases, but leveraging the infrastructure from the developed markets.
Any other views?
I think if you look at it, if you look at the longer term, it may not be that dissimilar to what happened with telecom and internet and everything else over the last 20 years. Yes, if you look at a small, narrow pocket of 1 or 2 years, you might feel that one country is ahead or another pocket is ahead or demographic is ahead, but over a longer period of time, it's generally benefited everyone, and it's made things a lot more easier to access, democratic, so on and so forth, from a technology standpoint. And that's probably how it will play out.
I think technology has been democratized, like what Pratik was saying. I think the race is on to acquire the compute, like what you say. And therefore, we see companies producing AI chips.
NVIDIA hit 3 billion last night, right?
Like,
in market cap.
Hitting the roof with the share price. And I think there's opportunity to, again, for developing countries to leapfrog, because now technology is more democratized. But then, however, the infrastructure will require the compute. And that's where the competition lies, right? You need a combination of both.
Right. In the last couple of minutes that we've got, I'm building an advisory company, so I'm very sensitive over advisory. But what happens to financial advisors now? Are they finished? Do we no longer need them? Is it new opportunities, or is it the end of an era? That's worrying.
This is a signal, Bill. Nobody wants to answer the question, but anyway, we try. Because I think the punchline is that, my view is that AI won't replace human, but human with AI will replace human without AI. I didn't say that. I think Jensen
It augments, right? Yeah.
So in the whole wealth advisory world, I think the augmentation will happen. Right? And there will be tools like Index GPT and other wealth advisory tools. It will be there. And then the race is there to build those, because you can take years of institutional data and knowledge capital in the bank and then build that into language model. But then you still need a human in the loop.
Yeah.
Which is why, that what differentiates one from another is whether the human can embrace AI.
And picking up on that question, if we look at, for instance, robo-advisors, portfolio managers, I mean, these tools have been around for a while, and they have not significantly displaced the banks. I mean, they've created their own category. Where the opportunity lies, and I think this is perhaps where the Gen AI is also leading us, is a competition in quality. And the better quality results, be it out of the structured data and the unstructured data, are likely to influence the consumer's buying decisions. Who do they go with? Who do they get a service from? And so without answering the question about the RMs per se, it's about how do we leverage this technology to enable the business to deliver better quality service, better customer experiences.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate, and I hope you found that interesting. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks.